a bustling urban neighborhood, Maya, a kind-hearted black girl, notices an elderly blind man, Mr. James, struggling to cross the street. She quickly offers her help, gently guiding him through the traffic. As they cross, they chat briefly, and her warmth and kindness leave a deep impression on him. Once they part ways, Maya goes home, unaware that her small act of kindness is about to change her life. The late afternoon sun bathed the neighborhood in a warm, golden glow, though the streets were anything but serene. Cars honked impatiently, vendors shouted about fresh produce, and children played noisily on the cracked sidewalks. Maya's neighborhood was a lively place, full of energy but lacking in comfort. Maya lived in one of these houses with her parents and two younger brothers. Their home was cozy but far from luxurious. The furniture was worn, the roof sometimes leaked when it rained, and the kitchen faucet had a persistent drip. Maya's father, David, had lost his factory job several months ago. It wasn't his fault. The factory had shut down, leaving many families in the area struggling. Her mother, Janet, worked long hours at a diner across town, often coming home too tired to do much besides collapse onto the couch. Even with her hard work, it was barely enough to keep food on the table and pay the bills. But Maya rarely complained. At just 10 years old, she was wise beyond her years. She was the kind of child who saw the silver lining in every cloud. While other kids her age grumbled about chores, Maya hummed while doing dishes or helped her brothers with their homework. She was known in the neighborhood for her sunny disposition and willingness to lend a hand, whether it was helping a neighbor carry groceries or chasing down a runaway toddler. Her parents often said she had a heart as big as the sky. That day, Maya had just left school and was walking home along her usual route. Her backpack bounced against her shoulders as she skipped lightly on the sidewalk, humming a tune. She didn't mind the chaos of the busy street. It felt familiar and alive. As she reached a bustling intersection, she noticed something unusual. An elderly man stood at the edge of the crosswalk, gripping a white cane. His posture was tense, his face a mixture of confusion and fear. Cars zoomed by, their horns blaring as pedestrians hurried across the street. But the man didn't move. He seemed frozen, unsure of which way to turn. Maya slowed her pace, watching him for a moment. The white cane in his hand told her he was blind. Her heart gave a little tug. Without hesitation, she adjusted her backpack and approached him. "Excuse me, sir," she said gently, her voice soft but confident. "Do you need help crossing the street?" The man turned his head slightly toward her voice. His face softened, though it still carried traces of worry. "Oh yes," he replied, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm trying to get to the park on the other side, but I can't seem to time it right." Maya smiled, though he couldn't see it. "Don't worry, I'll help you. Hold my arm, and I'll guide you." The man hesitated for a brief moment, as if unsure whether to trust this small, unfamiliar voice, but something in her tone reassured him. He reached out, and Maya gently took his hand, placing it on her elbow. "Okay, we'll go when it's safe," she said, glancing up and down the street. She waited until the light turned red and the cars came to a halt before stepping forward. "All right, let's go now. Take small steps with me." They crossed slowly, Maya speaking softly to guide him along the way. "We're halfway there," she said encouragingly as they reached the center of the crosswalk. "Just a few more steps." The man nodded, his grip steady but gentle. "Thank you, child," he said. "You're very kind. Not many would stop to help a stranger like this." "It's no trouble at all," Maya replied. "I'm happy to help." When they reached the other side, Maya led him to a bench near the park entrance. "Here you go, sir," she said, stepping back slightly to give him space. The man sat down, a look of relief washing over his face. "Thank you, young lady. What's your name?" "Maya," she said, smiling again. "I'm glad I could help." "Well, Maya, I don't know how to thank you," the man said, his voice filled with warmth. "You've made my day much easier." Maya shrugged, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It was just a small thing. You take care, okay?" The man nodded, his hand resting lightly on the handle of his cane. "You too, Maya. You're a good soul." With that, Maya waved goodbye and continued her walk home. She didn't think much of the encounter. It was just a little act of kindness, something she'd do for anyone. But as she turned the corner toward her street, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd done something important, something that mattered. Little did she know that single act of kindness was the start of a chain of events that would change her family's life forever. The next morning started just like any other for Maya's family. The smell of oatmeal simmering on the stove wafted through the small house as Maya's mother, Janet, prepared breakfast. David sat at the worn kitchen table, scanning the classifieds in the newspaper, hoping to find a job listing he hadn't already seen. Maya helped her younger brothers get ready for school, tying shoelaces and packing their lunchboxes with practiced efficiency. Life felt ordinary, though a little heavy, as it often did lately. But that feeling changed in an instant when the sound of a sleek engine purring outside their window broke the routine. Maya glanced out through the thin curtains and gasped. "Mom, Dad, there's a fancy car outside," she said, her voice a mix of curiosity and excitement. David frowned, folding his paper. "A fancy car? Here?" The entire family gathered at the window. A black sedan with shiny rims was parked in front of their home, gleaming in the sunlight like it didn't belong on their street. A tall, sharply dressed man stepped out, adjusting his cufflinks. His suit looked expensive, the kind of thing they only saw on TV. He walked up to their front door with purposeful steps and knocked. Janet glanced at David nervously. "Who could that be?" she whispered. David shrugged, more puzzled than alarmed. "I guess we're about to find out." He opened the door cautiously, revealing the man's warm, polite smile. "Good morning," the man said, his voice smooth and professional. "I hope I'm not intruding. My name is Michael Carter. May I come in for a moment?" David hesitated, but only briefly. There was something disarming about the man's demeanor, a quiet confidence that didn't feel threatening. "Sure, come on in," he said, stepping aside. Michael entered, his gaze sweeping across their modest home. He seemed to take in every detail: the worn furniture, the patched wallpaper, and the neatly arranged toys in the corner. But his expression didn't change. If anything, his smile grew warmer. "I won't take up too much of your time," he said, taking a seat at the table after Janet offered it. "I wanted to meet you and your family because of something your daughter did yesterday." Maya blinked, startled. "Me?" "Yes, you," Michael said, turning his attention to her. "My father, Mr. James, told me about how you helped him cross the street yesterday. He couldn't stop talking about your kindness. He said you were like an angel sent to help him." Maya blushed, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "Oh, it wasn't a big deal. I just saw he needed help." "It was a big deal to him," Michael said, his tone serious. "And to me. My father's been blind for many years, and it's not often that someone stops to help him like you did. Your kindness meant the world to him and to me as his son." Janet placed a hand over her heart, visibly touched. "That's very sweet of you to say, Mr. Carter, but Maya's always been that way. Helping people is just who she is." Michael nodded. "I can see that, and it tells me a lot about the kind of family she comes from." His gaze shifted to David, then to Janet. "I'd like to do something to show my gratitude, not just for Maya, but for all of you." David raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Gratitude? We're not looking for charity, Mr. Carter." Michael smiled gently. "I understand. This isn't about charity. It's about opportunity. I own a real estate development company, and I'm always on the lookout for people who value hard work, integrity, and kindness. It seems to me that these values are deeply rooted in your family." Janet and David exchanged a confused glance. "What are you saying?" Janet asked cautiously. Michael leaned forward slightly, his voice steady and sincere. I'd like to offer you a position at my company, Mr. Johnson. A senior role that I think would be a great fit for someone with your skills and background. I've reviewed your work history, and I believe you'd bring a lot to the table. David stared at him, stunned. How did you know about me? My father told me you were unemployed, and I did some research, Michael admitted, not unkindly. I hope you don't mind. I just had a strong feeling you might be the person I've been looking for to fill this role. Janet's eyes filled with tears, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. David, too, seemed at a loss for words. Mr. Carter, I don't know what to say, he finally managed. Are you sure about this? You've only just met us. I've met enough to know, Michael replied firmly, and I believe in rewarding kindness. Your daughter showed that to my father, and I'd like to give your family a chance to thrive. The room was silent for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. Then Maya spoke up, her voice small but hopeful. Does this mean Daddy will have a job again? Michael smiled at her. Yes, Maya, it does. The tears Janet had been holding back spilled over, and she reached for David's hand. This is everything we've been praying for, she whispered. Michael stood, buttoning his jacket. I'll send over the paperwork tomorrow and we can arrange for your first day next week, Mr. Johnson. I have a good feeling about this. As he headed for the door, David found his voice. Thank you, Mr. Carter. I don't know how we can ever repay you. Michael turned back, his smile soft but meaningful. You already have. Your daughter's kindness inspired this. Never underestimate how far a small act of goodness can go. As the car drove away, the Johnson family sat in stunned silence for a moment. Then Janet let out a breathless laugh. Can you believe it? This could change everything. David nodded, still dazed but hopeful. For the first time in months, the weight on his shoulders felt a little lighter. It's more than we ever could have hoped for, he said, pulling Maya into a hug. And it's all thanks to you, kiddo. The family spent the rest of the day talking excitedly about the future. For the first time in what felt like forever, they dared to imagine better days ahead. David woke early on the day of his new job, his nerves jangling with equal parts excitement and fear. He shaved carefully, donned the neatly pressed suit Michael had sent over as a welcoming gift, and stared at himself in the mirror. For the first time in months, he felt hope, but beneath the hope was a nagging doubt. Could he live up to this opportunity? Maya, he called as his daughter darted into the hallway. Wish your old dad luck today. You don't need luck, Dad, Maya said confidently, hugging him. You're going to do great. Her words settled his nerves a little. Janet handed him a packed lunch, and with a final wave, David stepped out into the crisp morning air. The sleek company car waiting to drive him to work was a reminder of just how much their lives were beginning to change. Walking into the expansive office building felt surreal. The modern glass and steel structure towered over the street, a far cry from the gritty factories David had worked in before. Michael greeted him warmly in the lobby, shaking his hand with the kind of firm, reassuring grip that put him at ease. Welcome to your first day, Michael said. I'll be showing you the ropes personally. I believe in investing in the people I trust. David nodded, his heart pounding. Michael's mentorship began immediately, and he guided David through meetings, introducing him to team members and discussing the intricacies of the business. By the end of the day, David was exhausted, but invigorated. He quickly realized that Michael hadn't taken a gamble on him for charity. He truly believed in David's potential. Over the weeks that followed, David poured himself into the job, working long hours and absorbing everything he could. His colleagues respected his dedication and down-to-earth nature, and Michael was always there to offer guidance when needed. Soon, David wasn't just fitting in, he was standing out. His ideas on optimizing construction processes saved the company money, and his leadership skills made him a trusted figure among his team. Within months, Michael promoted him to a higher position, one that came with a significant raise and a deeper sense of belonging. The first sign of how much their lives were changing came when Michael encouraged David to consider moving his family into a safer neighborhood closer to the office. At first, David hesitated. Moving felt like a leap. But after careful consideration, he and Janet decided it was time to give their children the environment they deserved. The day they packed up their modest home was bittersweet. Maya and her brothers were thrilled, but Janet lingered in each room, running her fingers over familiar walls. Their new home, however, was nothing short of a dream. The house was twice the size of their old one, with a bright, spacious kitchen, a backyard where the kids could play, and enough bedrooms for everyone to have their own space. Maya's favorite part was the big bay window in the living room, perfect for curling up with a book. On move-in day, the family wandered through the house in awe. "I can't believe this is ours," Janet whispered as she stood in the kitchen, her hands resting on the shiny granite countertops. David wrapped his arms around her. "We've worked hard for this. We deserve it." For Maya and her siblings, life began to feel like a new chapter had started. Their new school was well-equipped, with caring teachers and an abundance of resources. Maya, always a curious and ambitious student, thrived in her new environment. She joined the school's robotics club where her natural problem-solving skills shone. Her younger brothers, who had struggled in their previous school, were finally getting the support they needed to succeed. The change wasn't just academic. Maya was able to take ballet lessons, something she had always dreamed of, but that had been out of reach before. Her brothers joined a local soccer league, running across freshly cut grass in matching uniforms. The family's evenings became filled with stories of their day, laughter, and plans for the future. They no longer worried about overdue bills or whether the fridge would be full. Instead, they talked about goals and dreams. With the family's financial burdens easing, Janet found herself with something she hadn't had in years: free time. For so long, her days had been consumed by work, worry, and exhaustion. Now she had the space to breathe and to dream. One evening, as the family gathered in their new kitchen, Janet brought out a tray of cupcakes she had baked earlier that day. They were perfectly frosted, each topped with a swirl of buttercream. "Wow, Mom, these are amazing," Maya exclaimed, her face lighting up after the first bite. David nodded, grinning. "You've always been good at this, Janet. Maybe you should think about baking more often." The idea took root in her mind. With encouragement from her family, Janet began experimenting in the kitchen, creating cakes, cookies, and pastries that quickly became the talk of the neighborhood. Soon, Janet's hobby turned into a small business. She started taking orders for birthdays and events, her reputation for delicious baked goods spreading through word of mouth. The dining table was often covered with flour and mixing bowls as she perfected her recipes, and the house smelled like sugar and cinnamon most days. Before long, her side business grew into something bigger. With David's help, she opened a small bakery in their new neighborhood. The bright, cheerful shop quickly became a community favorite, with customers lining up for her famous red velvet cupcakes and chocolate chip cookies. Janet loved her new role. For the first time, she felt like she was doing something for herself, something that brought her joy and purpose. And the bakery's success was another reminder of how far their family had come. One evening, as they sat together in their cozy living room, David looked around at his family. Janet was reading a cookbook. Maya was showing her brothers a new dance move she'd learned in ballet, and the boys were laughing. "This doesn't even feel real sometimes," he said quietly to Janet. "Do you ever think about how it all started?" She nodded, her eyes soft. "With Maya's kindness. That's what started all of this." Maya, hearing her name, looked up and smiled. "It was just a little thing," she said. "No," David said firmly, his voice filled with emotion. "It was everything. It was the spark that changed our lives." The family sat in silence for a moment, each of them reflecting on how far they had come. David's success at Michael's company didn't just stop with promotions. His natural leadership, dedication, and innovative ideas continued to shine. He had a knack for finding solutions to challenges and creating opportunities where others saw obstacles. Michael, ever perceptive, quickly recognized David as not just an employee, but a true visionary. One day during a routine meeting in Michael's office, Michael leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "David," he began, "I've been thinking. You've been instrumental in helping us achieve record growth this year. I want to discuss something bigger, something that goes beyond just being part of my team." David looked at him, curious but cautious. "What do you have in mind?" Michael leaned forward, a glimmer of excitement in his eyes. "I want to offer you a partnership. We can co-lead a new venture I've been planning. I've wanted to get into affordable housing development, but I need someone I can trust to spearhead it with me. Someone who understands the value of community and hard work. And frankly, there's no one better than you." David's breath caught in his throat. A partnership? It was more than he had ever imagined. "Michael, I don't even know what to say. Are you sure about this?" Michael smiled. "I've never been more sure. You've earned this, David, and I believe we can make a real difference together." The venture into affordable housing wasn't just a business opportunity, it was a passion project for both men. Together, they worked tirelessly to identify neighborhoods where housing was scarce and costs were skyrocketing. Their goal was simple: to create high-quality homes that families in need could afford without sacrificing dignity or comfort. David brought a personal touch to every project. He insisted on visiting construction sites, talking to local residents, and ensuring that the homes were not just buildings, but places where families could build their futures. His commitment resonated deeply with everyone involved, from workers to investors. Within 2 years, their venture became a remarkable success. Not only did it earn substantial profits, but it also gained recognition for its positive impact on communities. Families who had once struggled to find decent housing now had safe, beautiful homes to call their own. David often said that this part of his work was the most fulfilling, knowing he was giving back in a meaningful way. With the success of their venture, the Johnson family's wealth began to grow in ways they'd never imagined. David and Michael's projects generated steady income, and David started learning about smart investments. He diversified their wealth into real estate, technology startups, and sustainable businesses, ensuring their financial stability for generations to come. The family's new life was nothing short of extraordinary. They traveled to places they had only seen in magazines, from serene beaches to bustling cities around the world. Maya and her brothers were introduced to experiences that expanded their horizons, from summer camps to cultural festivals. Yet, despite their rising wealth, the Johnsons remained deeply grounded. David and Janet made it a point to teach their children the value of money and hard work. "We may have more now," David often said, "but we'll never forget where we came from." The family's humility shone in their day-to-day lives. Janet continued running her bakery, refusing to let it become just a hobby despite their wealth. She found joy in connecting with customers and providing something meaningful to the community. Maya, now growing into a confident young woman, remained as kind-hearted as ever. She excelled in school and took on leadership roles, often speaking about the importance of helping others. Her teachers admired her maturity, and her peers looked up to her as a role model. The Johnsons also became known for their philanthropy. They set up a foundation aimed at supporting underprivileged families, focusing on education, housing, and opportunities for children. Every year, they hosted a community event, providing free meals, school supplies, and job fairs. Maya often took center stage at these events, sharing the story of how one small act of kindness had set everything in motion. "It wasn't just about crossing the street," she'd say, her voice steady and heartfelt. "It was about seeing someone in need and doing something about it. That's what changed our lives." One evening, as the family sat together on the patio of their now spacious home, David looked out at the sprawling garden, the warm glow of string lights reflecting in his eyes. "It's funny," he said softly, "how one moment can change everything." Janet nodded, a cup of tea in her hands. Maya's moment. That's what it was. Maya, who had been sketching in her notebook, looked up. "You always say that. But I don't think it was just me. It was all of us. We kept going, even when it was hard." Her words hung in the air, rich with truth. The family had come so far, but they had done it together, each of them playing a part in the journey. The Johnson family's transformation was more than just financial. It awakened a sense of purpose in all of them. David, Janet, and Maya often sat together in the evenings, reflecting on their journey. It was during one of these conversations that they decided it wasn't enough to enjoy their success. They wanted to share it with others who were still struggling. "We've been so blessed," David said, his voice filled with emotion. "But there are families out there who are still where we were. We have to do something." That night, the idea for the Maya Foundation was born. Named after the young girl whose act of kindness had sparked their journey, the foundation aimed to create opportunities for underprivileged families. Its focus was threefold: providing financial aid to struggling households, supporting education for children, and fostering kindness through community programs. The family worked tirelessly to launch the foundation. Janet managed the logistics, ensuring every dollar went to the right place. David used his connections in the business world to secure funding from corporate sponsors, and Maya served as the foundation's heart and voice. The foundation started small, but grew rapidly. It offered scholarships to kids who couldn't afford school supplies or tuition. It organized food drives and job fairs, helping families find stability. Most importantly, it ran programs to teach children the value of kindness. Mentoring sessions, storytelling workshops, and community service days. One of their most popular initiatives was the Kindness Chain Challenge, where children were encouraged to perform small acts of kindness and share their stories. For every story submitted, the foundation pledged a donation to local schools and charities. The challenge gained momentum, spreading beyond their city and inspiring thousands. Maya, now a teenager, embraced her role as a symbol of kindness with humility and pride. She often spoke at schools and community events, sharing her story and encouraging others to make a difference. Standing on stage at one of the foundation's events, she gazed out at the crowd, her voice steady but heartfelt. "I was just a little girl who saw someone in need," she said. "I didn't know it would change anything. But what I learned is that every small act matters. You don't have to be powerful or rich to make a difference. You just have to care." Her words resonated deeply with the audience. Children looked up to her as a role model, and parents felt inspired to teach their kids about compassion. Maya's warmth and sincerity made her a natural leader, and she took her role seriously. She worked closely with the foundation's youth programs, organizing events and mentoring younger kids. One of her favorite projects was a summer camp that combined fun activities with lessons on empathy and teamwork. "I want them to know they have the power to change the world," she often said, "even if it's just one person at a time." The foundation's efforts began to transform the very neighborhood where the Johnsons had once struggled. Schools received much-needed supplies, playgrounds were built for children, and local businesses flourished with the foundation's support. One of the most emotional moments for the family came when they returned to their old street for the opening of a new community center funded by the foundation. The center was equipped with a library, a tutoring program, and a food pantry, services that Maya's family had once desperately needed. As they walked through the building, now bustling with children and families, Janet wiped away tears. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "I can't believe we're able to do this." David nodded, his chest swelling with pride. "This is what it's all about, giving back to the place that gave us so much, even when we had so little." Neighbors who remembered the Johnsons' struggles came up to thank them, their gratitude heartfelt and genuine. "You've given us hope," one mother said, holding her toddler close. "We didn't think anyone cared about us anymore. Maya smiled, her heart full. "We care," she said simply. The Foundation's work didn't just help families, it inspired a movement. Stories of kindness spread, motivating others to take action in their own communities. Donations poured in, allowing the Foundation to expand its reach. Yet, through all of this, the Johnsons remained humble. They never forgot the moment that had started it all. Maya helping Mr. James cross the street. It was a constant reminder that even the smallest act of kindness could create ripples of change far greater than anyone could imagine. One evening, as the family sat together after another successful event, Maya looked around at her parents and siblings. "I'm glad we can do this," she said softly. "It feels like this is what we were meant to do." Janet smiled, reaching for her daughter's hand. "It's because of you, Maya. You started this. And now, we get to keep it going." The family held on to that moment, united by their shared purpose and the joy of knowing they were making a difference, one act of kindness at a time. The warm afternoon sun streamed through the large windows of the retirement home, casting a golden glow over the cozy common room. Maya, now a confident teenager, walked down the hallway with a sense of anticipation. In her hands, she carried a small bouquet of flowers, bright yellows and oranges, just the way she remembered the light that day at the crosswalk. When she reached the room, she paused for a moment before knocking gently. A familiar voice called out, "Come in." As she entered, Mr. James turned toward the sound of her footsteps, a broad smile lighting up his face. "Maya, is that you?" "Yes, Mr. James," she said warmly, placing the flowers on the table beside him. "I thought it was time I visited you again." He reached out for her hand, and she guided it to her own, just as she had done years ago. "You sound older," he said with a chuckle, "but I'd recognize that voice anywhere." Maya smiled. "I've grown up a bit, but I've been wanting to tell you something. That day at the crosswalk, it changed everything for my family." She began to share the story, how her act of kindness had led to the unexpected visit from Michael, her father's new job, and all the blessings that followed. Mr. James listened intently, his smile softening as she spoke. When she finished, he squeezed her hand. "Maya, I always knew you were special, but to think that something as small as helping me could lead to all of this, it's humbling." He paused, his voice filled with emotion. "Kindness is like planting seeds, child. You don't always see the fruit right away, but it grows, and you've planted a whole garden." Maya blinked back tears, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I guess we both planted seeds that day, Mr. James, and now I just want to keep it going." As she left the room, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Walking out into the sunlit courtyard, she thought about how one small moment could ripple outward, touching lives in ways no one could predict. The world was a big place, she realized, but it was also a place where small acts of kindness could make it brighter, one person at a time.